The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. The judge sat high on his bench, his face stern, his eyes scanning the room. Lawyers shuffled papers, and the occasional cough or whisper broke the quiet. Everyone was waiting for the next case to be called. No one expected what was about to happen. The doors at the back of the room swung open with a loud creak. All heads turned. A young boy, no older than 12, walked in. His clothes were clean but worn, his sneakers scuffed. His face was serious, his eyes focused. He didn't look scared, just determined. He walked straight down the aisle, past the rows of benches, and stopped right in front of the judge's bench. The judge looked down at him, surprised. "Young man, this is a courtroom. You can't just walk in here like this. Where are your parents?" The boy didn't flinch. He looked up at the judge and said, "You left me." The room froze. The judge blinked, confused. "What did you say?" The boy's voice was clear and strong. "You left me. You sent me away, and you forgot about me." The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "I don't understand. Who are you? What are you talking about?" The boy took a deep breath. 3 years ago, you were the judge in my case. My parents were gone, and I had no one. You said you would make sure I was taken care of. But you didn't. You sent me to a place where no one cared. I was alone." The judge's face changed. He looked like he had been struck. He stared at the boy, trying to place him. "Wait, are you?" The boy nodded. "Yes. I'm the boy from 3 years ago. The one you promised to help." The courtroom was dead silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The judge looked shaken. He leaned back in his chair, his hand covering his mouth. He seemed to be thinking hard, trying to remember. The boy didn't wait for him to speak. "You said you would protect me. But you didn't. You left me in a place where I was hurt, where no one listened. I waited for you to come back, to check on me. But you never did." The judge's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I didn't know." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. "You were supposed to know. You were the judge. You were supposed to make sure I was safe." The judge looked down at his desk, his face pale. He didn't know what to say. The boy's words hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Finally, the judge spoke. "I'm sorry. I truly am. I didn't realize. I didn't know it was that bad." The boy shook his head. "Sorry isn't enough. You left me. And now I'm here to tell you what happened. To make sure you don't forget again." The judge nodded slowly. "All right. Tell me. Tell me everything." And so, the boy began to speak. He told the judge about the place he had been sent to, a group home where the staff didn't care, where the other kids were mean, where he felt more alone than ever. He talked about the nights he cried himself to sleep, wondering why no one came to help him. He talked about the promises the judge had made, promises that were broken. As the boy spoke, the courtroom listened. No one interrupted. No one moved. Even the lawyers, who were used to hearing sad stories, were silent. This was different. This was a boy standing up for himself, confronting the person who had failed him. When the boy finished, the judge was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Thank you for telling me this. I don't know what to say. I failed you. And I'm sorry." The boy looked at him, his eyes steady. "I don't need sorry. I need you to do better. I need you to make sure no one else gets left behind." The judge nodded. "I will. I promise." The boy didn't smile, but he nodded back. Good. Because I'll be watching. And with that, he turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The judge sat back in his chair, his face a mix of emotions, guilt, regret, but also determination. He knew he had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The boy's words echoed in his mind, "I'll be watching." And for the first time in a long time, the judge felt like he had a purpose. He had failed once, but he wouldn't fail again. As the courtroom slowly returned to normal, the lawyers and spectators whispered among themselves. No one had ever seen anything like this before. A boy, standing up to a judge, demanding accountability. It was powerful, and it was unforgettable. But this was only the beginning. The boy's story wasn't over, and neither was the judge's. What happened next would change both of their lives forever. After the boy left the courtroom, the judge couldn't focus. He adjourned the remaining cases for the day and retreated to his chambers. The boy's words haunted him. "You left me." They echoed in his mind, over and over. He sat at his desk, staring at the wall. He tried to remember the case from 3 years ago. It had been one of many, a child in need of care, parents unable to provide. He had made the decision to place the boy in a group home, thinking it was the best option. But he had never followed up. He had assumed everything was fine. Now, he realized how wrong he had been. He had failed the boy, and he had failed his duty as a judge. He had promised to protect him, but he hadn't. He had left him in a place where he was hurt and alone. The judge felt a deep sense of guilt. He had always prided himself on being fair, on doing the right thing. But now, he saw that he had been blind. He had made a decision and walked away, not thinking about the consequences. He knew he had to make things right. He couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "I need you to find everything you can on the boy who was in my courtroom today. And I need the files from his case 3 years ago." His assistant was surprised but didn't ask questions. "Yes, Your Honor. I'll get right on it." As he waited, the judge thought about what the boy had said. "I need you to do better. I need you to make sure no one else gets left behind." Those words struck a chord. He had become complacent, going through the motions without really thinking about the impact of his decisions. But now, he saw the human cost of his actions. When the files arrived, he spent hours going through them. He read about the boy's life before he came into the system, the neglect, the instability. He read about the group home he had been sent to, the reports of poor conditions, the lack of supervision. He felt sick to his stomach. How had he not seen this before? He knew he had to do more than just apologize. He had to take action. He called a meeting with the social workers involved in the case. He wanted to know why the boy had been left in such a bad situation, and what could be done to fix it. The meeting was tense. The social workers were defensive, explaining that they were overworked and underfunded. They did the best they could, but they couldn't keep track of every child. The judge listened, but he wasn't satisfied. "That's not good enough," he said. "These are children's lives we're talking about. We have to do better." He knew it wouldn't be easy. The system was broken, and fixing it would take time and effort. But he was determined. He had seen the face of his failure, and he couldn't ignore it. As he left the meeting, he thought about the boy. He didn't even know his name, but he felt a connection to him. The boy had been brave enough to stand up and speak the truth. Now, it was his turn to do the same. He went back to his chambers and started drafting a plan. He would work with the social workers, the courts, and the community to make sure no child was left behind. He would be the voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. But even as he worked, he knew it wouldn't be enough. He had to find the boy. He had to make sure he was safe, that he was getting the help he needed. He couldn't let him down again. The judge's journey was just beginning. He had been shaken out of his complacency, and he was ready to fight for change. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was long, and there would be obstacles. But he was determined. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The judge knew he had to find the boy. He couldn't let him disappear again. He called his assistant and gave her clear instructions. I need you to find the boy who was in my courtroom yesterday. I don't care how long it takes or what it takes. I need to know where he is. His assistant nodded. I'll do my best, Your Honor. The judge also reached out to the social workers involved in the boy's case. He asked them to check the group home where he had been placed, to see if he had returned there. But the reports came back negative. The boy was gone. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of him. The judge grew more and more frustrated. He had failed the boy once, and now he was failing him again. He couldn't let that happen. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He started visiting shelters and community centers, asking if anyone had seen the boy. He talked to social workers, teachers, and even police officers. But no one had any information. One day, as he was walking through a park near the courthouse, he saw a group of kids playing basketball. He stopped to watch, hoping maybe the boy would be among them. He wasn't, but something else caught his attention. A man was sitting on a bench, watching the kids play. He looked rough, his clothes dirty, his face unshaven. But there was something familiar about him. The judge approached cautiously. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know a boy, about 12 years old? He was in my courtroom a few weeks ago." The man looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Why do you want to know?" The judge hesitated. I need to find him. I need to make sure he's okay." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I might know who you're talking about. But he's not here anymore." The judge's heart sank. "Where is he?" The man shrugged. "He moved on. Said he had to keep going. But he left something for you." The judge's eyes widened. "For me?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to the judge. He said if anyone came looking for him, to give them this. The judge took the paper, his hands trembling. He unfolded it and read the words written in neat, careful handwriting. "I'm okay. I'm strong. Don't worry about me. Just do better." The judge felt a lump in his throat. The boy had known someone would come looking for him. He had left a message, a reminder of what was important. The judge looked at the man. "Do you know where he went?" The man shook his head. "No. But he'll be all right. He's a tough kid." The judge nodded, though he didn't feel reassured. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He knew he might never find the boy, but he also knew he couldn't give up. He had to keep trying. As he walked away, he thought about the boy's words, "Just do better." They were simple, but powerful. They were a challenge, a call to action. And he intended to answer that call. The search wasn't over. The judge knew he had a long road ahead of him. But he was determined to make a difference, to ensure that no child was left behind. The boy had given him a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The judge returned to his chambers, the boy's notes still in his pocket. He sat at his desk, staring at the wall, deep in thought. The boy's words echoed in his mind, "Just do better." They were a reminder of his failure, but also a call to action. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. He had to do more than just apologize. He had to take real, concrete steps to make sure no child was left behind. The boy's courage had sparked something in him, a sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "I need you to schedule a meeting with the other judges, the social workers, and community leaders. We need to talk about the child welfare system. It's time for a change." His assistant hesitated. "Your Honor, that's a big undertaking." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," the judge replied. "Just make it happen." The meeting took place a week later in the courthouse's largest conference room. The atmosphere was tense. Judges, social workers, and community leaders sat around the table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The judge stood at the head of the table, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I called this meeting because something happened recently that I can't ignore," he began. "A young boy came into my courtroom and confronted me. He told me I had failed him. And he was right. I did." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, everyone listening intently. "3 years ago, I made a decision to place this boy in a group home. I thought it was the best option at the time. But I never followed up. I never checked to see if he was okay. And because of that, he suffered. He was hurt, neglected, and forgotten. And it's not just him. There are countless other children in the system who are falling through the cracks. We have to do better." One of the social workers spoke up. "Your Honor, with all due respect, we're doing the best we can. The system is overwhelmed. We don't have enough resources or staff to keep track of every child." The judge nodded. "I understand that. But, doing the best we can, isn't good enough. These are children's lives we're talking about. We owe it to them to do more." Another judge chimed in. "What are you suggesting?" "We can't just snap our fingers and fix the system overnight." "I'm not suggesting it will be easy," the judge replied. "But we have to start somewhere. I propose we form a task force dedicated to improving the child welfare system. We'll work together to identify the problems and come up with solutions. We'll reach out to charities, nonprofits, and the community for support. We'll make sure no child is left behind." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone considered his words. Then, one by one, they began to nod. It was a small step, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, the task force got to work. They held meetings, reviewed case files, and interviewed social workers and foster parents. They identified several key issues: lack of funding, overworked staff, and a shortage of foster homes. But they also found something else: hope. There were people in the community who cared, who wanted to help. They just needed direction. The judge reached out to local charities and nonprofits, asking for their support. He organized fundraisers and awareness campaigns, spreading the word about the challenges facing children in the system. He even started visiting schools and community centers, talking to kids and listening to their stories. One day, he visited a youth center in a rough part of town. The kids there were wary at first, unsure why a judge would want to talk to them. But as he shared his story, about the boy who had confronted him, about his own failures and his determination to do better, they began to open up. One girl, no older than 10, raised her hand. "What if we don't have anyone to help us? What if we're all alone?" The judge knelt down so he was at her eye level. "You're not alone," he said gently. "There are people who care about you, who want to help. And I'm going to make sure they do." The girl nodded, her eyes wide. "Okay." As he left the youth center that day, the judge felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He knew he was making a difference, even if it was just one child at a time. But even as he worked to improve the system, the judge couldn't stop thinking about the boy. He still didn't know where he was or if he was safe. He had tried everything to find him, calling shelters, talking to social workers, even putting up flyers, but there was no trace of him. One evening, as he was leaving the courthouse, he saw a familiar face. It was the man from the park, the one who had given him the boy's note. The judge approached him cautiously. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you remember me?" The man looked up and nodded. "Yeah. You're the judge." "That's right. I've been looking for the boy. Do you know where he is?" The man shook his head. "I told you before, he's moved on. But he's a tough kid. He'll be all right." The judge sighed. "I just want to make sure he's safe." The man studied him for a moment, then said, "You really care about him, don't you?" The judge nodded. "I do. I failed him once. I don't want to fail him again." The man smiled faintly. "Maybe that's enough. Maybe knowing someone cares is all he needs." The judge wasn't sure if that was true, but it gave him some comfort. He thanked the man and walked away, the boy's note still in his pocket. As the weeks turned into months, the judge's efforts began to pay off. The task force implemented new policies to improve oversight of group homes and foster care placements. They partnered with local charities to provide resources and support for children in the system. And they launched a mentorship program, connecting kids with adults who could guide and support them. The judge knew there was still a long way to go, but he was proud of what they had accomplished. He had found a new purpose, a reason to keep fighting. And he knew it was all because of the boy who had stood up to him in that courtroom. One day, as he was leaving the courthouse, he saw a group of kids playing in the park. He stopped to watch, a smile on his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. He knew he couldn't save every child, but he could make a difference. And that was enough. As he walked away, he thought about the boy's words, "Just do better." He had taken those words to heart, and they had changed his life. He didn't know if he would ever see the boy again, but he hoped he was out there somewhere, safe and strong, knowing that someone cared. And he hoped that, wherever he was, the boy was proud of him. The judge's efforts to reform the child welfare system were gaining momentum, but his heart still ached for the boy who had inspired it all. He often found himself staring at the note the boy had left, "I'm okay. I'm strong. Don't worry about me. Just do better." Those words had become his mantra, a constant reminder of why he was fighting so hard. One afternoon, as he was reviewing case files in his chambers, there was a knock on the door. His assistant stepped in, holding a folder. "Your Honor, I think you'll want to see this." The judge looked up, curious. "What is it?" "It's a report from one of the social workers. They think they might have found the boy." The judge's heart skipped a beat. He quickly took the folder and opened it. Inside was a photo of a young boy, his face slightly blurred but unmistakable. It was him. The boy who had stood in his courtroom and demanded accountability. "Where is he?" the judge asked, his voice trembling. "He was spotted at a shelter on the other side of town," the assistant replied. "He's been staying there for the past few weeks. The social worker said he's been keeping to himself, but he seems to be doing okay." The judge stood up, his mind racing. "I need to see him. Can you arrange it?" His assistant nodded. "I'll make the call." The next day, the judge arrived at the shelter, a modest building tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. He was greeted by a social worker who led him to a small room where the boy was waiting. When the judge walked in, the boy looked up, his expression calm but guarded. "Hello," the judge said softly. "Do you remember me?" The boy nodded. "You're the judge." "That's right. I've been looking for you. I wanted to make sure you're okay." The boy shrugged. "I'm fine." The judge sat down across from him, careful not to seem too imposing. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been thinking a lot about what you said to me in the courtroom. You were right. I failed you. And I'm sorry." The boy looked down at his hands, his face unreadable. "It's okay. You're trying to do better now." That's what matters. The judge felt a lump in his throat. This boy, who had every reason to be angry and bitter, was showing more grace and wisdom than most adults. Can you tell me what happened after you left the courtroom? Where have you been? The boy hesitated, then began to speak. He talked about how he had left the group home and wandered the streets, trying to find a place where he felt safe. He had stayed in shelters, sometimes with friends, and had even slept in parks when he had nowhere else to go. But he had never given up. He had kept going, determined to survive. I didn't want to go back to the system, the boy said. I didn't trust it. But I knew I couldn't do it alone forever. So I came here. The judge listened intently, his heart breaking for the boy. You're incredibly brave, he said when the boy finished. And I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. I'm here to help you, if you'll let me. The boy looked at him, his eyes searching. Why do you care so much? The judge smiled faintly. Because you reminded me of what's important. You showed me that I needed to do better. And I want to make sure you have the chance to grow up safe and happy. The boy was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay. Over the next few weeks, the judge worked closely with the social workers to ensure the boy was placed in a safe and supportive environment. He found a foster family who was willing to take him in, a kind couple who had experience caring for children with difficult pasts. The judge visited regularly, checking in on the boy and making sure he was adjusting well. One day, during one of his visits, the boy surprised him. I want to go back to school, he said. I want to learn and make something of myself. The judge smiled, his heart swelling with pride. That's a wonderful idea. I'll make sure you have everything you need. The boy nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Thank you. As the judge left the foster home that day, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. The boy was safe, and he was starting to dream again. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. But the judge knew his work wasn't done. There were still countless other children in the system who needed help. And he was determined to be there for them, just as he had been for the boy. He returned to the courthouse with renewed energy, ready to continue fighting for change. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. He had found his purpose, and he wasn't going to stop until he had made a difference. As he sat at his desk that evening, he looked at the boy's note one more time. Just do better. Those words had guided him this far, and they would continue to guide him in the days to come. The boy had given him a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The boy's decision to return to school marked a turning point, not just for him, but for the judge as well. It was a sign that healing was possible, that even after years of neglect and hardship, there was still hope for a brighter future. The judge threw himself into his work with even greater determination, knowing that every child in the system deserved the same chance. The foster family the boy had been placed with was a perfect match. The couple, who had raised 3 children of their own, treated him with kindness and patience. They encouraged him to talk about his feelings, something he had never been allowed to do before. Slowly, he began to open up, sharing stories about his past and his dreams for the future. The judge visited often, bringing books, school supplies, and sometimes just sitting with the boy to talk. During one of these visits, the boy surprised him with a question. Why do you keep coming back? Don't you have other things to do? The judge smiled. You're important to me. What happens to you matters. And besides, I enjoy spending time with you. The boy looked down, a shy smile on his face. I like it when you visit. Those simple words meant the world to the judge. They were a reminder that his efforts were making a difference, even in small ways. Meanwhile, the task force the judge had formed was making progress. They had secured additional funding for the child welfare system, allowing them to hire more social workers and improve conditions in group homes. They had also launched a campaign to recruit foster families, emphasizing the importance of providing stable, loving homes for children in need. One of the most significant changes was the creation of a mentorship program. The judge had seen firsthand how much the boy had benefited from having supportive adults in his life, and he wanted to extend that opportunity to other children. The program paired kids in the system with mentors, teachers, community leaders, and even former foster youth, who could offer guidance and encouragement. The judge himself became a mentor to a young girl named Mia, who had been in and out of foster homes for most of her life. She was quiet and reserved, much like the boy had been when he first arrived at the shelter. But over time, she began to trust him, sharing her hopes and fears. During one of their meetings, Mia asked, "Do you think I'll ever have a normal life?" The judge looked at her, his heart aching for the pain she had endured. "You already have so much strength inside you," he said. "And with the right support, you can achieve anything you want. It might not be easy, but it's possible. I believe in you." Mia smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Thank you." Back at the courthouse, the judge continued to push for systemic change. He worked with lawmakers to draft new legislation aimed at improving oversight of the child welfare system. He also partnered with local schools to create programs that would help kids in foster care succeed academically. One day, he received a call from a reporter who wanted to interview him about his efforts. At first, he was hesitant. He had never sought attention for his work, and he didn't want to seem like he was grandstanding. But then he realized that sharing his story could inspire others to get involved. During the interview, the judge spoke candidly about his failures and his determination to do better. "I was part of the problem for a long time," he admitted. "But then a brave young boy showed me the impact of my actions. He reminded me that every child deserves a chance to thrive, and it's our responsibility to make sure they get that chance." The article was published a week later, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the community reached out, offering to volunteer, donate, or become foster parents. The judge was humbled by the outpouring of support, but he knew it was just the beginning. As the months passed, the boy continued to thrive. He excelled in school, earning top marks in math and science. He also joined a local basketball team, where he made friends and learned the value of teamwork. The judge attended every game, cheering him on from the sidelines. One evening, after a particularly close game, the boy approached the judge with a smile. "We won," he said proudly. The judge grinned. "I saw. You played really well." The boy hesitated for a moment, then said, "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when no one else did." "Thank you." The judge felt a lump in his throat. "You don't have to thank me. Seeing you succeed is all the reward I need." The boy nodded, his eyes shining with gratitude. "I'm going to keep working hard. I want to make you proud." "You already have," the judge replied. "More than you know." But even as he celebrated the boy's progress, the judge couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to be done. He knew that for every child like the boy or Mia, there were countless others who were still struggling. He was determined to reach them, to give them the same opportunities he had fought so hard to provide. One night, as he sat in his chambers reviewing case files, he came across a photo of a young boy who reminded him of the boy from the courtroom. He was about the same age, with the same serious expression. The judge felt a pang of sadness, but also a renewed sense of purpose. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "I need you to schedule a meeting with the task force. We have more work to do." The next morning, the judge stood in front of the task force, his voice filled with passion. "We've made progress, but we can't stop now. There are still children out there who need us. We have to keep fighting for them, just as we fought for the boy who started all of this." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. Then, one by one, they began to nod. They were ready to keep going, to keep pushing for change. As the meeting ended, the judge felt a sense of hope. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. He had found his purpose, and he wasn't going to stop until every child in the system had the chance to thrive. The boy's words echoed in his mind, "Just do better." And he intended to do just that. The judge's work was far from over, but the changes he had set in motion were beginning to ripple through the community. The mentorship program was thriving, with dozens of children paired with caring adults who offered guidance and support. The foster family recruitment campaign had brought in new families, providing safe and loving homes for children who had once felt forgotten. And the increased funding for the child welfare system was making a tangible difference, allowing social workers to provide better care and oversight. But the judge knew that real change took time. He continued to push for systemic reforms, working tirelessly to ensure that no child would fall through the cracks again. He also kept a close eye on the boy who had inspired it all, visiting him regularly and watching with pride as he continued to grow and thrive. One afternoon, the judge received a call from the boy's foster mother. "He has something he wants to show you," she said. "Can you come by after school?" The judge agreed, curious and excited. When he arrived at the foster home, the boy greeted him with a wide smile. "I got an A on my science project," he said, holding up a poster board covered in colorful diagrams and notes. The judge examined the project, impressed by the boy's hard work and creativity. "This is amazing," he said. "You should be really proud of yourself." The boy beamed. "I am. And I wanted to thank you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here." The judge felt a lump in his throat. "You did this, not me. You're the one who worked hard and never gave up." The boy shook his head. "But you believed in me. That made all the difference." The judge left the foster home that day with a full heart. The boy's success was a testament to the power of hope and perseverance, and it reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. But he also knew that there were still many children who needed help, and he was determined to reach them. One evening, as he was leaving the courthouse, he ran into Mia, the young girl he had been mentoring. She was waiting for him outside, her face lit up with excitement. "I got accepted into the art program," she said, holding up a letter. The judge smiled. "That's wonderful news. I knew you could do it." Mia nodded. "I couldn't have done it without you. You helped me believe in myself." The judge felt a surge of pride. Mia's success was another reminder of the impact he was making, one child at a time. But it also reinforced his belief that there was still so much more to be done. The next day, the judge called a meeting with the task force to discuss their next steps. "We've made progress," he said, "but we can't stop now. There are still children out there who need us. We have to keep fighting for them." The task force agreed, and they began to brainstorm new initiatives. One idea was to create a scholarship fund for foster youth, helping them pay for college or vocational training. Another was to establish a network of after-school programs, providing kids with a safe place to go and opportunities to learn and grow. The judge also reached out to local businesses, asking for their support. Many were eager to get involved, offering donations, internships, and job opportunities for young people in the system. The community was coming together in ways the judge had never imagined, and it filled him with hope. But even as he celebrated these successes, the judge couldn't shake the feeling that there was still one piece missing. He had helped the boy and Mia and countless others, but he knew there were still children who were struggling, who hadn't yet found their way. One night, as he sat in his chambers reviewing case files, he came across a photo of a young girl who reminded him of Mia. She had the same quiet strength, the same determination to survive. The judge felt a pang of sadness, but also a renewed sense of purpose. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "I need you to schedule a meeting with the social workers. We have more work to do." The next morning, the judge stood in front of the social workers, his voice filled with passion. We've made progress, but we can't stop now. There are still children out there who need us. We have to keep fighting for them, just as we fought for the boy who started all of this." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. Then, one by one, they began to nod. They were ready to keep going, to keep pushing for change. As the meeting ended, the judge felt a sense of hope. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. He had found his purpose, and he wasn't going to stop until every child in the system had the chance to thrive. The boy's words echoed in his mind, "Just do better." And he intended to do just that. The judge's journey had come full circle. What had started as a moment of reckoning in a courtroom had grown into a movement that was transforming the lives of countless children. The boy who had confronted him that day had become a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder that even the smallest voice could spark monumental change. As the years passed, the judge's efforts continued to bear fruit. The scholarship fund for foster youth had helped dozens of kids attend college or vocational training, giving them the tools they needed to build a better future. The after-school programs had become a lifeline for children in the system, providing them with a safe space to learn, grow, and dream. And the mentorship program had created lasting bonds between kids and caring adults, showing them that they were not alone. The boy, now a teenager, had blossomed into a confident and ambitious young man. He had graduated from high school with honors and was preparing to start college on a full scholarship. His dream was to become a social worker, so he could help other kids who had been through what he had. One evening, the judge invited the boy to his home for dinner. As they sat at the table, the boy looked around the room, taking in the photos and mementos that lined the walls. "You've done so much," he said. "Not just for me, but for so many others." The judge smiled. "It's because of you that I started this journey. You showed me what was possible." The boy shook his head. "No, you did that yourself. You chose to listen. You chose to act. That's what made the difference." The judge felt a lump in his throat. "I'm just glad I could be there for you." The boy smiled. "And I'm glad I could be there for you too." The judge's work had also inspired others to get involved. Mia, the young girl he had mentored, had gone on to become an advocate for foster youth, using her voice to raise awareness and push for change. She often spoke at community events, sharing her story and encouraging others to take action. One day, she called the judge with exciting news. "I've been accepted into law school," she said. "I want to become a lawyer so I can fight for kids like me." The judge felt a surge of pride. "You're going to be amazing. I have no doubt about that." Mia laughed. "I learned from the best." The judge's legacy extended far beyond the courtroom. He had become a beacon of hope for the community, a living example of what could happen when people came together to fight for a common cause. His story had been featured in newspapers, on television, and even in a documentary about the child welfare system. But for the judge, the real reward was seeing the impact of his work in the lives of the children he had helped. One afternoon, as he was leaving the courthouse, he was approached by a young woman he didn't recognize. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the judge?" He nodded. "Yes, I am." The woman smiled. "I just wanted to thank you. I was in the system when I was a kid, and your reforms made a huge difference in my life. Because of you, I had a chance to succeed." The judge felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you for telling me that. It means more than you know." The woman nodded. "You changed my life. And I'll never forget that." As the judge walked away, he thought about how far he had come. He had started this journey feeling broken and defeated, but he had found redemption in the most unexpected place, a young boy who had dared to stand up and speak the truth. That boy had given him a second chance, and he had taken it, pouring his heart and soul into making the world a better place. But the judge knew his work wasn't done. There were still children out there who needed help, who were waiting for someone to believe in them. And he was determined to keep fighting for them, no matter how long it took. One evening, as he sat in his chambers, he pulled out the boy's note and read it one more time. I'm okay. I'm strong. Don't worry about me. Just do better. Those words had guided him through the darkest moments, and they would continue to guide him in the days to come. The judge smiled as he folded the note and placed it back in his pocket. He had done better. And he would keep doing better, for as long as he lived.